Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, host also of RT's talk show Crosstalk. So yesterday, President Biden made his first primetime address to the nation. He hasn't given any press conferences, but he gave a primetime address on the anniversary of, President Trump making his statement about COVID. It was a very strange affair, rather lachrymose and depressing, long on flights of rhetoric. You get a sense that the writers were people who enjoy writing and like to pile on the adjectives and the repetition of phrases. In terms of the substance, there were really two important things. First of all, he seemed to take all of the credit for the vaccination, which is kind of bizarre because the vaccines were developed under the Trump administration, and the FDA did not give its approval to any of the vaccines until December the 11th. And so obviously the beginning of the vaccination came at the end of the Trump administration and at the start of the Biden administration. So it's a little bit much for him to start to take any kind of a credit for it. So
well, he has a history of plagiarism.
Okay. Exactly, plagiarism, exactly. Always an issue with the Bidens. So there was that. And in fact, again, he dishonestly suggested that Trump had somehow, even though he didn't mention his name, that Trump somehow had responded passively to the virus. He didn't do anything. He was silent about it and so on, which is untrue. We know that
patently untrue.
Patently untrue. We know he closed down travel to and from China on January the 31st, and he closed down travel to Europe and so on. So we know that and all of which was incidentally Biden himself had opposed. So that's one thing. The other thing was his rather grim view of the future. So apparently everyone's going to get vaccinated, and maybe, just maybe, he will allow Americans to celebrate July the 4th, not having big parties, but just with their immediate friends and family members, only if they behave themselves, only if they take all kinds of precautions, take the vaccines, wear masks and social distancing, then maybe Biden, will permit this. But should they misbehave, then forget about it. What's your take, Peter?
Well, I agree. I mean, taking credit for that, okay, that's the least of my concerns here. I mean, when the economy is going well, the president in power takes credit for it. It's usual. I'm not going to get into that kind of partisanship here. However, it was the second part, and you alluded about it. I mean, this very, very dire, gloomy tone that he took. First of all, most people at this point are going to use their own personal responsibility how to move forward here, and he doesn't give any sunlight to that, which is a very big mistake. Now, as far as allowing us to do something, well, who the hell are you, Joe Biden, to say what we can do? You don't have that power. It's not vested in you in your office. Okay, so I don't know who wrote it. Whoever did is like 20-something that doesn't know anything about separation of powers, okay? The president of the United States has the bully pulpit. That's probably the most important thing the president has. And Trump should have used it better during his time in office dealing with this. I would agree with that. But Trump did a lot of things. But, saying what we can do and what we can't do, and if essentially he will allow us to do that. I find that really bothersome because of the moving goalpost. I mean, it's constantly moving. Okay. I mean, is this going to be, are we going to keep healing goalposts until the 2022 elections, George? Mark my words. You heard it here. You bet.
Right. No, I think it's a very good point. But even on the narrow point about giving permission for this, that, and the other, it still doesn't fall within his bailiwick because, as we've found out during the past year, it is the governors who ultimately have the power. So if the governors decide that no one can gather on July the 4th, then the governors will ensure that no one gathers on July the 4th. It's not up to the president. I mean, as Trump found out, it really wasn't up to him to determine what, who can and gather where. So that's a nonsensical. But I mean, the whole idea that you have, we're going to celebrate independence by essentially affirming everyone's dependence on the diktats of the government. So there is that kind of nonsensical element to it. But the other thing is that he himself gave this really very, very gloomy outlook, which is simply not borne out by the numbers. I mean, the numbers are falling drastically. I mean, there's been a dramatic decline in new cases, dramatic decline in the number of deaths. And instead of saying, look, we're over the worst, let's just move forward. He was just saying, the things that's really terrible. Looks like things are going to keep being gloomy, terrible in the future. It's a very, very peculiar message, unless he's trying to use this still as a cudgel with which to beat Trump.
Of course. And one of the things that I think reading between the lines is that what about the millions of people that simply will refuse to take the vaccine? What is going to happen to them? Is it you're on a no-fly list? Won't allow you to open a bank account or freeze your bank account? I mean, I read into it as an implicit threat.
Yes.
Okay.
No,
because a vaccine can be available, but there's still, I mean, and jurists have talked about it. Should people be compelled to take it? There is an argument on both sides. Okay, Alan Dershowitz remarkably believes the state should
Right. Yes. Though I've seen him in a debate with our friend Robert Barnes, in which he seemed to Barnes was taking the libertarian position. That Dershowitz actually came close to agreeing with Barnes, because Dershowitz's argument is only if you can prove that the vaccine is completely safe, and if you can actually prove that the disease is really lethal and affects everybody in an immediate fashion, then you can justify it. But where the jury is still out as to the effectiveness and the side effects and so on about the vaccine. And when you think about basically people recover from the virus, 99.5% of people afflicted with the virus recover, then I think Dershowitz would probably say it's hard to make it mandatory. You can still make it, you say it's desirable, but making it mandatory is very hard to justify.
But again, it goes back to the question, what if you refuse to do it? And what will be the implications? Right. And then what is the role of the federal government in dealing with a citizen that refuses to take a vaccine? Now, maybe it goes, we've talked more, ever since the inception of the gaggle, we've talked about states' rights more than I ever would have imagined, okay? Right. Maybe we'll fall into that purview, I don't know. Well, but I really do worry about people that will refuse, and if there will be regulatory action taken against people that refuse to do it. And that's in the cards. We don't know where that's
and I think what you're saying is absolutely right, because even if the government itself doesn't step in and mandate it, there'll be all too many private organizations that will jump in and say, oh, well, as you say, oh, you haven't taken a vaccine? No bank account for you.
Well, we know what Bank of America likes to do for the intelligence community.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Or, hey, no, well, you can't get on this plane. You can't get on this bus. You can't book a table at this restaurant. So, the private sector may well be just only too happy to start coercing people. And that's a really very serious issue, because after all, we've been hearing all these years, particularly from the pro-abortion activists, well, my body is my own. It's not up to the government or anyone to tell me what I can and can't do with my body. But apparently, turns out your body isn't your own, and government and everybody else can tell you what you can do with it. So, Yeah.
You brought up really an interesting point, and I think we can give a couple minutes on it. To continue to attack Trump. You're absolutely right, because and the stupidest thing they did was to take his Twitter account away from him, right. Because now Trump is hovering around everything and over and under, you know, and he's out there, but you can't see him. Okay. And so that gives a reason for the Biden people in his orbit to just keep hammering down on this, because let's face it, Biden is, masks and civility. Okay. That's his thing. Okay. His thing is not being Donald Trump. All right. And so and in the trajectory that he said, he can't get off. He can't get off it now. Okay. Right. So that's where he's going. Right. And again, the conversation we're having right now, there's so many questions. Joe Biden's speech opened up more questions than he answered. Okay. Right. And especially it sounded like someone was writing a menu for the International House of Pancakes. I mean, can we just cut away at all of this flowery language? What the hell do you plan to do?
That's right. But it's a very interesting thing, because when you're saying that, well, he took the credit, and all politicians, they do that. And I agree with that. On the other hand, let's imagine what happened with the moon landing. The first man on the moon happened under the watch of President Richard Nixon. Nonetheless, he gave full credit to Lyndon Johnson and Jack Kennedy, who actually launched this program. And in fact, when Nixon was speaking to the astronauts, Johnson was also, was permitted to speak to them. That's kind of what you normally do. You don't just hog all the credit. But why is he doing that? Because he wants to continue to blame Trump for the virus and wants to maintain the story of he's responsible for the 500,000 deaths.
But the juxtaposition is there is bipartisanship in Washington, but there's bipartisanship for the worst, most awful things. Think of Anthony Blinken talking with Lindsey Graham about Venezuela, or was it Marco Rubio? Yeah, that's the thing. They're all lockstep on that one. They're not going to. They don't trash Trump there, okay? But when it comes to everything else, when national security state, they are in lockstep. But everything else. And the thing is here, it's not a criticism per se of Donald Trump. It's a juxtaposition. Again, I am not Donald Trump. I mean, and they're going to try to pull this off for 2 years. I am not Donald Trump.
Yes.
And it'll wear thin. Watch.
That's right. And I think that's why politically it's going to be to their advantage to keep this grim Reaper story of the virus going, as close to the midterms as possible. They're not going to let it go like on, July the 4th. Oh, well, let's all just forget about it and focus on something else. Because, whatever they're doing now is not at all popular. I mean, people are watching the chaos at the border. There may also be the foreign policy adventures that they'll be embarking on. So, they know they're going to be facing Trump again fairly soon. So they want to just crank out as much anti-Trump propaganda as possible.
What the visual, the optic that I take away from his speech yesterday, I don't know how you felt about it, but Joe kind of faded in to the podium, and then when he turned around very robotically, like he was afraid he was going to fall down, and then he just kind of faded away down. It was very, there was nothing robust about it. Nothing at all. Okay. It was very feeble.
It was very, exactly. And that's where you see the contrast with Trump. Trump is by nature an optimist. I mean, that's who he is. I mean, he's unable, physically to be pessimistic. That's it. So when he gave these messages very early on in the virus, hey, it's not going to be that bad. We'll be out of it within a couple of months. He was wrong. But you can see why he was wrong. I mean, it's in his nature. I mean, no, this isn't all that serious. We're going to bounce back. And that has been his message, because that's who he is. Now, with Biden, it is a real downer. And you have to wonder, is this the sort of person American people really want to be listening to? I mean, nobody really wants to get depressed. That was a very depressing address.
Well, considering most people are depressed,
right,
okay?
Exactly.
I mean, misery loves miserable company, and that's what his message was. I look at it. If you look at empirically what's going on, and we can use now a pre-Civil War term, the free states, the optimism is returned.
Right.
Okay. And they don't want to look back. And that's a juxtaposition. If you look at Texas, you look at Florida, those people, they didn't want to hear that from Biden. They want to know when, no, it's not if we're going to celebrate Independence Days with our family. We will. Okay.
Exactly. They want to say, we want the beaches to be open. We want the parks to be open. We want restaurants to be open. We want everyone back to work, back to business. And they don't want to say, well, maybe, if we keep everything locked down, for a few more months, everyone wearing masks and everything, maybe, just maybe, we will allow you to gather in small groups on July the 4th.
An interesting caveat. He didn't mention going back to school. I mean, he said it rhetorically, but he didn't talk about how to do it. That's haunting him. That's haunting the Democrats, because so many young families are so at loose ends right now. And it's throwing for young people, the entire educational process out of whack. I mean, what grade are you in? Are you going to double up with the people coming in from behind? What are you going to do? I mean, this is turning into a catastrophe. It is and the mental damage you do to young people. They're so impressionable. And these are traumatic events for a lot of them here. We don't know even the impact of that now.
Right. No, that's exactly right. All this thing is online education. It doesn't work with children. It
barely works with adults.
Not the way children are wired to be sitting, in front of a computer screen studying, and failing children to allowing them to socialize with their friends, and and all of the things that children do in a normal existence. All that is just causing great damage, and again, falling back in terms of the educational attainments. I mean, we have people worrying about the SATs, worrying about their university applications. And, hey, my child has lost a year, maybe 2 years of studying. How is he going to be able to get into all these great colleges that I want to get him into? So it's a serious.
Well, and then also the level, the amount of competition is this 2-3 times fold. Okay, I mean it's because the Biden and the Democrats are terrified of the teachers' union. Okay, and there's going to be a political price to be paid for that, because worrying about your children is a truly bipartisan thing. I mean, you don't have to be a Republican or a Democrat.
And that's a very good point. I mean, because of the unfair competition, because of course private schools are functioning. It's the state schools that are closed down. So therefore,
Catholic
if you're going to a state school and you're being denied the possibility of continuing with your education in a proper fashion, then you're going to be at even bigger disadvantage to those who are going to a private school, who are also the offspring of very rich and successful parents. So again, the lockdowns are helping the rich and no one else.
Professional managerial class strikes again.
Exactly. Okay. All right, Peter. We will, of course, be watching the doings of the Biden administration with our customary laser-like focus. And remember, we are now on Rumble. Look us up on Rumble, and we will be back. And if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See, even the dog's waiting. See you soon. Bye.